us. Now we're getting to the ballot tender row, and as of Friday, the court had ruled that the IBC should give a fresh tender to someone else, the presidential ballot printing tender to another company other than Al Ghurair, as there has been a lot of issues of conflict of interest as well as the process of procuring this very same service. Now, the very latest, at least from today, was that the Jubilee has accused the judges in the ballot tender of conflict of interest, claiming that Odunga's wife is Orengo's niece and William Oko is related to Raila's wife, Ida Odinga. Let's start from there. Because there'll be a lot of accusations and counter accusations. Is this worth pursuing? And in this particular issue, is there really, I mean, you start with Eric, you're from the legal fraternity. Let me start with you. The issue of conflict of interest, does it hold water in this particular case?
Absolutely, absolutely. I do remember when we were doing the Goldenberg Commission at KICC, and one of Patney's very many gimmicks was to come up and say that the chairman of the commission, then Justice Bosire, was conflicted to the extent that his son apparently held some position in one of the organizations that was subject to the inquiry. And there was a long ruling. The matter was adjourned so that they can canvass just the question of conflict of interest. And conflict of interest has a huge legal tradition. It's gone a long way back, because you remember that justice must not only be done, but it also must be seen to be done. People can actually have a genuine, legitimate grievance if they think, regardless of what the legal merits are, if they think that someone has done him in, right? Because of his relationship with another party. So when there is conflict of interest, sometimes it's an apparent conflict of interest or an actual conflict of interest. An actual conflict of interest is where the facts of the case make it completely untenable for a judicial officer to adjudicate a matter. An apparent conflict of interest is where there are reasonable grounds for a party to suspect that, well, I wouldn't feel very comfortable if this person sat on this matter because, well, I mean, the other party is your in-law, the other party is your former client, the other party is your tenant.
But isn't the suspect that is coming up now?
Sorry?
It's suspect that this accusation, at least of conflict of interest, is coming up now.
It is suspect that everything is coming up now, including public participation in procurement, it is basically, people have reached a point where the judiciary has to adjudicate, forget about the law and the facts of matters. Part of the adjudication right now is just suspicions. People are alarmed that a decision can put somebody to a very, very substantial disadvantage.
Right.
And that a decision can give somebody leverage that didn't exist before the decision was made, and that can really change things altogether for people in the election. So the point being made here is that if there is reason, and I'm not saying there is or there isn't, but if there is reason to suspect that the relationship between the judges that have been named and other individuals involved, and that relationship is of such a nature that it impairs the judges' impartiality, both in actual and apparent terms, then there's probably cause to pause and consider that.
Do you buy this twist, Wanakulundu, to the script, to the tale so far?
Absolutely not. In fact, I think when Counsel Eric Ngeno talked about the phrase, justice must not only be done, but it must also be seen to be done. I'm sure you are referring to the case of Sussex justices, Regina versus Sussex justices, ex parte McCarthy. That's where that great quote was made by Lord Hewitt. Yeah. So, but the question is this: when the suspicion, you raise the suspicion before the judgment is delivered. If you have got doubts as to if justice will be conflict of interest, I think we have seen in what I can call a Christian marriage marriage ceremony. They should ask that: is there anybody who feels that these two should not be tied in holy matrimony? If you don't say anything, may you rest forever.
It doesn't foreclose, for instance, review or vacation.
Yes.
Should pertinent facts become evident later.
Apparent after that.
It doesn't foreclose.
Then what do? You move to court, and Eric,
so it can be raised. The point being, those issues can be raised. Those concerns can be raised at any stage.
What do? The appropriate forum is to go to the next level. And for the record, I don't know if the people who gave the people who gave those accusations of conflict of interest were referring to the same case. First of all, William Oak is a Court of Appeal judge. There's no way he could have sat on the ballot printing case because that was in the High Court. And I think I remember that on the ballot printing case we had got Justice Mativo, Odunga, and the chief judge was, I think, Justice Kariuki. And if you remember, this case initially came to Odunga when I remember when counsel Professor Bensi Hanya was filing, it was first of all before Odunga. Then Odunga said that given the weighty matters of this particular case, he requested the Chief Justice to empanel a 3-judge bench to listen to it. He did not take it alone, right? If it's William Huko was in the case of counting at the constituency levels, and if anything, the issue of jurisdiction, and here Huko was with Justice Agnes Murgor and Justice Patrick Kiage, and I remember the issue of jurisdiction was dealt with extensively at the Court of Appeal before that. The issue of whether Ouko had got relatives was not raised at that particular time.
It can be raised at any point.
Right. Okay, but
so it can be raised at any point.
At
that's
any point,
what Eric is saying.
But not through this kind of forum,
right?
In my view.
But
for the first time, I feel that I have a feeling that those who raised this one here,
in terms of following up on this story, then, if indeed this is an accusation, and this is a season of accusations and counter accusations, but is there any worth then in following this up? Indeed, the relationship.
Well, again, it's following it up when in what forums. I think that if indeed there is suspicion on the part of the litigants that the judges who gave the order had some interest in the matter, declared or undeclared, then they can raise that in court for sure. They can go and argue that. I'm a bit suspicious, that said, when it's done in public forums, and I think the media has to be careful,
yes,
about entertaining this. And I think that, I'm not saying that don't report it or whatever, but I think you've got to be sure you assert, what the facts of the case are. And I think the media can actually go and look into this, and ask, okay, fine, is it actually true that these people are relatives or so and so? Did they actually sit in the judgments that they're said to have sat on? And I think to the extent that it is valid, I think, for Jubilee to bring up this issue in court, when
as
it does
opposed
that,
to just a public.
Yeah, I think when it does that in the public, the danger of that is simply impugning justice, because anybody can declare anything, out in the public sphere.
Right. So
the question is for the media is to be able to distill and to see which of these accusations actually bear some weight that the public might want to consider, when deciding whether or not these are people.
But would this be another case of being led by the nose? That's for media, following whatever the latest pronouncement is by the politicians.
Yeah, I feel that at the point where we are, and given that we are just likely to go around circles, and it is going to be accusations and counter accusations, because anybody in this country is related to another, I would actually veer off completely from the path we are taking. And if the courts were to be advised, and of course they are independent courts, so they may not be advised,
right,
we would hand this matter to independent units or agencies. In this regard, I'm wondering, I'm just asking or speaking, thinking aloud on whether we might not charge the UNDP, which has a big stake in elections, to take over and deal with it, in the hope that there we don't have our relatives, So
that's how I'm wondering, deal with what?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to be fairly clear, because allegations that are being made, or not really allegations, there's nothing wrong with being related to somebody else, But, I mean, the points that are being made are not being made, as far as I know, in the courts. If they are, that is a proper forum to have them. What I'm a bit uncomfortable with is sort of entertaining and impugning judges and their integrity, from outside the court system, and where it seems that it's politicians doing it. So we've got to be a bit careful that they're not seen to sort of lean on the judges, and stuff, and also to sort of drive this antipathy of the public towards the judiciary without an actual basis. And I think for us, for the media, in covering this story, you really need to go after what the facts are.
Right.
And is it true that there are seeming conflicts that we as a public, as employers of the judiciary and stuff, should be aware of? And are these issues actually being raised and debated in courts? And then can we wait and hear what the courts will say?
Let me throw this to Eric. I mean, you're a legal mind, and you would advise at least those in the Jubilee headquarters coming from the presidential press unit that at least you shouldn't be making such pronouncements if it's not just mudslinging at a presser. Should at least take the right course. If there is need to really get down to the facts and not just mudsling.
I think underlying those allegations is a very, very fundamental issue here. There's a very strong feeling, anybody who's been following the proceedings going in court, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there's a very strong feeling out there that certain political sides, factions, actively forum shop. Forum shopping is a situation where you basically, stalk around the court corridors looking for a favorable judge, and then you go to them and get orders. And, well, I understand how the judiciary is manned and how the divisions are manned and how the personnel there are deployed. But there is somebody who will not look at the organogram of the judiciary and understand that, look, it happens that Odunga gets to be hearing these cases because he's a judge in the Constitutional and Judicial Review Division. So somebody else is going to be saying, all these anti-government decisions happen to come from one judge. And this judge happens, according to those allegations, to be related to this person. And when it's not this judge, it's another judge anyway, of, according to this person, the same stripe. And there is a sense in which, when these things intersect, the structure of the judiciary and how people have been deployed, and the political moment, and the fact that NASA are exploiting this opportunity to actively just generate litigation. Right now, I'm told there's a case about voter registrar that has just come in. So you see, they have actually a systematic campaign to just keep litigating, and just making things very difficult. Essentially, somebody else would say they're trying to frustrate the holding of elections. And somebody else would say they are getting favorable hearing in every frivolous encounter with the judiciary. And all those things are happening. So it reaches a point where, what do? Do you write an open letter to the Chief Justice? And these are politicians. Politicians, their best forum is a rally. A guy will tell you, look, I represent my people. I have a right to say what I have to say. I have freedom of...
To the people.
I have a freedom of expression. Yeah. But you can see, you have to understand where these people are coming from.
Right.
And they have to be reassured in a meaningful way that the fact that Judge Odunga, for instance, keeps hearing these matters has nothing to do with him being Orengo's relative. If he's Orengo's relative. And if he's not Orengo's relative, if he's not Orengo or whoever's relative, I mean, those facts should come out and they should be reassurance. Apart from just the judiciary reacting all the time and saying, no, don't do this. They should actually say these officers are impartial, they have total integrity, they are independent, they are sound legal minds.
And we'll get to that from the pronouncement the president made. But really quick, Dorothy, a few seconds, and Patrick on this issue, and Kulundu, really quick, because we need to wrap this matter up.
I'll just repeat that we don't have much time left. I think it's only 30 days.
That's another thing we need to get into, the issue of time. I'll let you exhaust that particular concern in the next part. Kulundu, on this issue of the accusations being raised.
Well, I think Eric has put it clear and let the public, as much as the politicians could say what they are saying, especially with regard to Justice Odunga. Now Eric has clarified the reason why all these cases are coming to Odunga. He's the head of the Constitutional and Judicial Review Division. And by the way, Justice Odunga is an expert in administrative law. And he's not just a judge. In fact, I can tell you, there are not so many litigants who have been able to appeal Odunga's judgments. Because this judge is very thorough. Right. Among the few judges I know, he's on the bench, but he still publishes. I think you've heard of Odunga's judges. Yes. This man publishes daily. So he does his work thoroughly.
He's thorough.
Yeah, I think, again, it's an issue of the arenas that are chosen. And I think the media's case in this sense is partly what Eric just said, which is to clarify the issues so that you don't get caught up with this whole political fight that's going on.
Yes.
Which is meant to inflame passions. So it's to actually take a dispassionate view of it for the media and to actually present the facts. The other thing I would say, which is curious, and I'd want to hear from our guys here, is the issue of sub judice about the cases that are being considered. It seems to be that there is a very selective application, at least by our politicians, about the cases they will comment to. And they'll go to Parliament and say, we won't say something about this because it's an active matter. Yes. But now that it's there, it's still in court, it's going to be appealed by the IBC.
Just as a last comment,
really quick,
is this when you go to court, you file a cause, and a decision is given, that decision doesn't really belong to any party. Justice has been done. When justice is done, justice is a public good.
Right.
All of us have won that justice has been done, and the party who has lost will correct their position accordingly. But NASA celebrated these cases so in such a vulgar way that obviously the Jubilee people are going to look around and go like, wait a moment.
Well, some might describe the response by the president and the deputy quite vulgar. We'll get a sample of that, yes, right after the break. Right after the break. And Madam Dorothy, exhaust her point on the time lines that we have and the time frame that we're working with. Stay with Press Pass.
Ulikuwa unadaiwa tafadhali, ili uweze kuzungumza na
Welcome back. The Jubilee Party is on record accusing IEBC and the judiciary of conspiring to favor the opposition by meeting all of its demands. In a scathing attack started off by President Uhuru Kenyatta, Jubilee leaders said they will not accept the change of date of the coming general election, insisting the elections will be held on August the 8th this year. This was in Baringo County. Partly, let's listen in.
I am telling the nation, every single individual in Kenya, including the judges, including the IEBC and the opposition, there is nobody who has not been aware that the election shall be on the 8th of August 2017. And I am saying, Kenyans are ready for that date. You change and mess with that date, we will not accept you denying the people of Kenya their constitutional right to elect their leaders. Mambo ya nusu mkate hakuna. Mambo ya nusu mkate hakuna.
Leo Uhuru ametoa matamshi mabaya sana kwa mahakama. Ni kama kutisha mahakama. I want to tell Uhuru there is nobody above the law in Kenya. Even Uhuru is under the law.
Tena amesema ya kwamba tumeenda mahakamani ili kuvuruga mambo ya kura. Wewe Rais Uhuru, wacha nikwambie, lazima uheshimu mahakama. If you are satisfied with any decision of the court, the avenue of dissatisfaction is appeal, not condemning the judiciary.
And of course, a response there by David Maraga, the CJ, was in part in a statement that we in the judiciary are open to constructive engagement, including being criticized. However, when political leaders cast aspersions on the administration of justice based on a misrepresentation of statements. It has a potential to impair public confidence in the courts, and this concerns me a great deal, said the Chief Justice in a statement yesterday in response to this. Well, you were talking about, Eric Ngeno, some of the vulgar sentiments that were put out by NASA. What the president said was by no means what you'd find in a love letter to anyone. And the threat, it would seem, to the judiciary.
It's not a threat at all, in any sense. A threat is where you say, if this happens, this will be the consequences. He says that if anything is done that will interfere with the election date, we shall not accept. That is very forceful expression of a very obvious constitutional reality. The Constitution is very clear on when the date elections shall, not may, not are likely to be, shall be held. And that date is 8th by the reckoning, the first Tuesday of August is 8th of August. That's our date of destiny. Now, Article 3 of the Constitution says that every person has the obligation to respect, uphold, and defend the Constitution. The president has just said a constitutional fact, and he has said in his obligation, and our obligation, all of us, in fact, all of us should not accept any maneuvers that look like they are going to change or make it necessary for us to think of changing the date of election. So the idea is this. And you're saying the idea is this. This is a very clear constitutional mandate. And when people go to court and extract litigations in an incremental manner that in their cumulative consequence are likely to direct us or compel us to think of holding elections on a different date, we need to tell people that there is a bottom line, there is a red line where we cannot go beyond. Elections will be held on that date. They must be held on that date. The court orders, the sum total of those court orders, when everything is said and done, is that we will hold very good elections or we will hold some sort of election because of what the court has directed. So the court must be cognizant of that. What has been happening lately is that the judiciary has been deliberately abstracting itself from a socio-political context and making decisions as if they live in another world. They live in this country.
If I may, there's a few problems I have with what Erica said. Now, first, let's not forget in 2013 the court date was the election date was set by the courts, and it was not in the August date that the Constitution actually specifies, and we didn't hear too much about politicians coming and saying we will not accept, that somehow it is unconstitutional. So again, in this case, I find it quite problematic that the president chooses a public forum to raise these issues. If he's got a problem with the judgments that have been made, the forum to make it is within court, and he's got every right to get his lawyers to go there and make his court. The third thing I'll say is, what is it that the president is saying he shall not accept? Is it a court judgment if the courts do actually say don't hold the election on the 8th of August?
Well, they've made it clear they're not accepting any extensions.
That's my question. So if he's saying you will not accept a court judgment to that, then I've got a huge problem, with him, because the courts are the final arbiters about what the Constitution says, not the president. And it's not me as an individual who decides what it says. We've all agreed that there is this system that goes, essentially looks at it and says what is permissible and what isn't within the framework of that Constitution. And if the courts do decide, for example, that you can push this, then that is fine, because the courts have that mandate to do it. The final thing, I think, is we've got to understand when it comes to the allegations of the president leaning on the courts and on independent agencies. I think we've got to understand that the president, by dint of his position, by virtue of the position he occupies, has a higher threshold than a regular Joe speaking. Okay. I can sit and say, yeah, I don't think that they should do this, etc. But speaking in his capacity as a president, and he's always the president, he's never not the president, when he speaks, and because of his office and the powers that are vested in his office, it can very easily be seen to be intimidating and threatening to other constitutional office holders. And he needs to be very careful that that is not the case, that is not perceived even to be the case. So I think he should be much more contained in the statements it makes about issues such as this.
All right, Hassan.
Mark, I'll say one thing. Two things. First of all, I'm actually surprised. Some people say you should say that the Constitution is very clear. I don't know what kind of geniuses these people are. I even, especially from, I even heard it from counsel here that the Constitution is very clear. It's not very clear. That's why it's subject to interpretation. If it were that clear, there will be no reason why the High Court would be given original jurisdiction to be the first point of call when you want to interpret the Constitution. It's because it's not very clear. Laws are never very clear because they're not
But the point to that end is it's cast in stone.
It's not cast in stone. I think the president got it wrong.
One narrative has been thrown
out. No. I think Eric should he's the president's legal advisor. Should have told two things. One thing.
Let's clarify.
Let him finish.
There are circumstances under which
the Attorney General is the legal advisor to the
government, not to the president.
even you work. You are Abdulkadir. Last time I checked.
Finish your point. It's not cast in
checked,
stone. This has been the
It's not because it will only be that certainty of that date shall only come after interpretation. And Gadara has pointed very well that last time the court set the date. The date. I think remember it was just an hour, isn't it? He set for us the date of March 4th. Then there are circumstances under which we might not even have that one. For instance, if our presidential candidate dies right now, we might not have the election on 8th.
It's not cast in stone in that.
It's not cast in stone. Another thing is that we have got what we call unforeseen circumstances. What we call when we come, let's say, a state of emergency. We might come to a situation where we might not even have what we call extraordinary circumstances.
Yes.
We might not even have that.
Is the court trying to generate extraordinary circumstances through decisions, incremental decisions?
I don't know. I don't know how you can predict that. That's why you're heading.
If it is,
but again, Mark, lastly on that issue.
It is impairing public confidence in itself.
Lastly on that issue.
It's actually killing itself as a judiciary.
Lastly on that issue.
No, I don't think
I think the person who said the words from the president, I've always had plenty of respect for the president because he's somebody who is usually very easy to bargain. He looks like someone who likes who knows how to bargain, isn't it? He's a deal maker. But for this time to make this kind of statement, why it's worrying and very dangerous is this, that these are things that are coming from somebody who under Article 143 enjoys immunities. So that whatever he has said, he cannot be held accountable. Except maybe if we move under Article 144.
You haven't said how he is wrong to say that the date of elections.
I remember what he said.
And that we have a duty to uphold the Constitution and therefore reject.
Remember what he said, that
he made that point clear.
Tukifanya nini, msifikiri kwamba kwa sababu we have been tolerant, tunawaogopa.
Atuogopi, even though so, Dorothy, as you respond as well, Eric said we all need to ensure that the election is held on August 8th. I'm sure he's also throwing the media.
Or we just agree on our own dates. I mean, right now,
the timelines.
No.
Dorothy, hold on. Let Dorothy make a point.
Let me put it this way. I hear you, Eric, but I disagree. The reason why I disagree is that there has been quite a bit of tampering with the Constitution since August 2010. And one of the most obvious points relates to Chapter 6 on integrity. You know, it seems like that thing has just been pushed to the back burner. So if on that very important matter which determines the quality of leadership of this country, that we don't care, and therefore we can do anything anyhow, you know. I want to look at the Constitution, you know, as not cast in stone. I want to look at the Constitution as meant to guide us, but not to enslave us. So let us reflect on that, and that, as Mark has said, if push comes to shove and there is a situation where August 8th has to be changed, nobody's going to die, you know. It's a piece of paper and has been tampered with already. If it had not been tampered with, I would say, who are we to, you know, this thing has been intact. Why are we now trying to tamper with it? A date, that is just a date. A date is...
but a date to guide as well, some
yes,
might argue.
it is to guide us, not to enslave us.
Right.
if we
And
argue,
we have to make
you remember the two-thirds
closing
gender rule,
comments.
isn't
I'm
it?
sorry, gentlemen.
What
It's
happened?
another one.
With that, who
And
thought
by
that
the way,
if they don't pass that two-thirds gender rule,
thank you for
Parliament
coming.
was supposed to really to dissolve.
On August,
yes,
last year.
What happened?
Yeah.
We got the Supreme Court.
And
with,
mark you, the
whatever.
two-thirds
We did
gender
that anyway.
rule is
Because-
written in the mark.
Yes.
It is written in the Bill of Rights. So that one, if anything, should not be tampered with. And here we are, we have been crying, we are talking about it, nothing seems to be happening. Actually, as far as I'm concerned, the Supreme Court is not legally constituted, you know. So we would start there. If we are putting up with it is true, it is not legally constituted because it is more than two-thirds.
All right,
But
and we're
to go
making,
back to
and we're
what the
making
president
our,
was
yes,
saying,
our closing remarks.
And what Erica said, I think there's a few things we should keep in mind. First, the Constitution itself does say that procedural technicalities should really not subsume justice itself.
Okay.
So if NASA or whoever else has a case to file, has a justice issue that they want predicated, it shouldn't be the case that the courts are constrained in listening to this simply because there is a date.
Okay.
You know, and I think that has been acknowledged. I think if you look at why we ended up with March 4, there was an acknowledgement of certain realities.
All right.
You know, that we couldn't have it or wait till the August thing.
Okay.
So let's accept that. I also think that when
Hold on to that point, Patrick. Well, someone might say there are two narratives at play, and one that we don't have time to bring any side track to the election being carried out on August 8th. The other is that the opposition is pushing for different issues so that they could come to nusumkate kind of arrangement. Well, as we make our closing comments, lady and gentlemen, how do we pursue this as media, given the different narratives that are at play at the moment? I'll start with Dorothy going down.
I personally feel that the issues that we have should be looked at in depth. We should probe, we as media should probe both sides incisively and find out who has what to gain by postponing or delaying. It's the same, by postponing or being on schedule with the elections. If there are matters that are going to compromise the integrity of the election, like if the tendering is flawed,
yes,
then I think that is an important matter. And in as much as I'm not qualified to make a statement on who is who. I've heard that some people are related to other people,
yes,
you know, and others people were also going to benefit from
conflict
the
of interest,
you know.
yes.
So the thing is that everybody is going to be interested. So my personal opinion is that the date shouldn't matter if at the end of the day we come up with a free, fair, and a free, fair election which is full of integrity.
All right. Okay. Let me throw this to Eric and then go down to Senior.
one of the most, I think, like I said, the judiciary has decisional independence, and no one should really argue with that. How it exercises that judicial independence can take us very good places or very interesting places. But most importantly, if it exercises independence badly, it will impair its own authority, all right, as the arbiter of and you know, the explainer of the law to us. Secondly, there's a place we're coming from as a country. Our constitutional framework right now is a response to a very bad place we were in around 2007, 2008. The reason why we say the president must be sworn in broad daylight, the reason why we say we must have a Supreme Court to decide the presidential election is because a presidential election one day had a dispute and nobody had confidence in the judiciary, and so the country went to hell in a handbasket. Now, if the judiciary entertains cases whose aggregate implications are that it's not possible for us to hold elections on 8th August, it will show that we have not learned the lessons of our context that brought us where we are today. Right. Most importantly,
they need their time to.
If this election ends up portraying the judiciary as a legal wing of the opposition, to be a very sad day.
Well, neither is it a
this
legal
country.
wing for
It is not, and
ruling
we're
party.
asking them to do their job. We're not saying that they should do the things the
All right.
Jubilee way. We're just
Okay.
saying, could we stop NASA and interrogate what they are up to and take decisions cognizant of our context, social and
right.
political context?
There's a picture being drawn of a crisis, perhaps, that there will be a crisis if elections are not held on August 8th. Interrogating this particular issue.
Well, first, I think that would be an artificial crisis. I don't think that if we don't have an election on August 8th, that there would be necessarily a crisis. It depends on what the courts rule, and people would have to get interpretations from the courts to clarify the issue. I need to just confront something that he said.
Quickly.
I think it's better for us to have a delayed election and an incredible one.
Okay.
In 2008, we did not fight because the election date was changed. We fought because the election that was carried out was incredible.
All right,
And
you
I
made that
think
point.
it's important for us to insist that it is that the credibility of the election must not be impinged simply because we need to adhere to
right.
certain procedural technicalities.
You have the point.
It's a constitutional
Okay.
procedural.
All right.
I want to reiterate to our viewers and Kenyans at large that have got a lot of faith in our constitution, and the independence of the judiciary is guaranteed under Article 161. So in view of the threats and the threats of timelines that are coming in with regard to the judiciary, I would ask our honorable justices to stick to the quote which Justice Mativo referred to, the Immanuel Kant's great quote, let justice be done even if the heavens fall. In terms of timelines, there's no crisis. Printing ballot papers, and I can speak this with advice from an expert in printing. It can be done in 2 days. And in fact, don't need to go far. Just go to, just make a consortium of Nation Media Group Printing and Standard Media Group Printing. We have this thing in 2 days. We have ballot papers.
So there's no crisis.
There's no
All right.
crisis.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen and lady, for your time. Eric Ngeno shakes his head as we wind up. I guess you'll have some convincing to do as we wrap this program up. Thank you to the team that has made this possible. Next week, we won't have press pass. If we do indeed have the presidential debate, that is the one for the running mates, and then the following week for the presidential candidates. If they agree to come, the negotiations are still ongoing with the party representatives. Thank you for watching. Good night.